I'm Ruben Nepales with Rappler. I'm talking today to Jason Reitman, who directed Saturday Night, which I loved.
Hmm.
And hey, great to see you again,
Hello,
Jason.
old friends. Good to see you.
Yes. The entire cast you picked to play iconic figures is outstanding. But since we have time restrictions, can you briefly talk about casting the following and why? Corey Michael Smith as Chevy Chase, Matt Wood as John Belushi, Dylan O'Brien as Dan Aykroyd, Nicholas Braun in a dual role as Jim Henson and Andy Kaufman, and Gabrielle LaBelle, who is fantastic as Lauren Michaels.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever I would tell people that I was making a movie about the opening of Saturday Night Live, all people would ask is, how the hell are you ever going to cast this film? And it was genuinely challenging and surprising at every turn. Corey Michael Smith, who I think is known more as a dramatic actor, came in and brought an authenticity to the ego that required humbling. And while a lot of other comedians came in and tried to do Chevy Chase impersonations, Corey was able to identify this idea of a comedian who was touched by God, who needed to be humbled. And that fragility is, I think, what makes Corey so good at playing Chevy. Matt Wood is probably an actor that ever since he was a little kid, every person has wondered, hey, are you going to play John Belushi one day? He just looks just like him. And he came in and he understood the physicality and again, also understood the vulnerability of John Belushi on October 11th, 1975, wondering, how is this going to change my life? What happens when I become a television star? John was reluctant to sign his contract and went into hiding that day. And so we needed someone who understood the comedic side, but also the vulnerability. Um, Dylan O'Brien is someone obviously, we know from Teen Wolf and Maze Runner, but none of us were aware that he had this gear, this ability to do the kind of rhythmic timing of Dan Aykroyd. It's a very, very hard role to play. It's the hardest role we had to cast, and it's the one that went all the way to the last second. And then Dylan came in, and we started talking about Dan, and and who he was. And Dan, of course, I know really well because I directed him in Ghostbusters. And Dylan, suddenly it clicked and he just started rattling off dialogue like Dan. And the other thing about Dan that I don't think people realize is that he was a heartthrob and that every woman at SNL wanted him and he wanted all of them. And Dylan, of course, has no problem filling those shoes. And then what was Andy
Nicholas
Kaufman?
and Gabrielle.
We originally cast, we wrote the role of Jim Henson for Nicholas Braun. Gil and I thought this is just too perfect. He'll be hilarious. And then Benny Safdie was originally going to play Andy Kaufman, but Benny's movie got greenlit and he had to go direct a film. And all of a sudden, we're trying to figure out, all right, well, who do we have as Andy Kaufman? And we kept on thinking, well, Nicholas Braun would be really good. And furthermore, if actors can play multiple roles on Saturday Night Live, why can't they play multiple roles in this film?
And last is Gabriel.
Gabriel LaBelle.
Yes.
I met Gabriel LaBelle at a screening for The Fabelmans in London, and he was standing next to Steven Spielberg, and somehow this 21-year-old man was holding his own next to the greatest director on earth. And there was a there was just a confidence to him that was necessary for the Lorne that I wanted to portray on screen. Because at the end of the day, Lorne is like dad for every wayward comedian. We needed to portray a young man who had so much dad energy that you could believe he built the orphanage for every wayward musician and comedian. And Gabe was able to fill those shoes immediately.
For my last question, on a fun note, your film tells us that Milton Berle was legendary not only as Mr. Television but also for being well endowed. So, can you talk about how different that era was and the sexual and political milieu that Saturday Night made its debut in? Because Milton reportedly liked to expose himself during the time.
Yeah, I think, I I sadly know multiple people that Milton Berle exposed himself to. This is something that was just something he used to do. It really is a sign of another time. And one of the reasons I wanted to make Saturday Night Live is about generational shift. It's about one group of young people ripping television out of the hands of another. And we needed to portray what television was like at the time. So Milton is a representation of everything that was going out the window and everything that needed to be pushed aside so that these young comedians could create something new.
Jason, thank you so much and congratulations again. Great to see you
Great to
again.
see you, everyone. Good to see you.